Hello besties! Welcome to Emma's Tales. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you. As you do so, sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The cameras flashed so bright it felt like the sun had broken loose and fallen into the middle of the room. My brother stood at the center of it all, his smile wide, teeth catching the light as though even they had been polished for the occasion. A giant check, framed and ridiculous in size, leaned against the podium. $75 million in bold, black ink. The figure looked unreal, the kind of number you only ever saw in magazines or the kinds of movies that made people believe in impossible luck. Yet here it was real and in his hands. The applause rose like a wave, crashing against the walls, drowning out every thought in my head. My mother clapped until her palms turned red, tears running down her cheeks as she looked at him like he had just cured a disease. My father, for once, had his chest out, nodding like this moment had been built out of his own sweat and dreams. Every person in that room wanted to touch my brother, to take a picture with him, to soak up whatever magic had chosen him out of everyone else. And me? I sat there, motionless. My throat felt dry, my chest hollow. I clapped, but the sound of my palms meeting was drowned in the roar of everyone else's adoration. My brother had always been the golden one, the one who made people lean closer just by entering the room. Still, I had never imagined anything like this. Money, a Tesla, a mansion, things so far out of reach they didn't even belong in daydreams. The Tesla was rolled in a moment later, sleek and shining, its white paint gleaming beneath the spotlights. People surged forward to take pictures, their voices buzzing like a hive. The keys to the mansion came in a velvet-lined box, placed carefully into his hand as if it were something holy. He raised them high, and the cheering grew wild, strangers shouting his name like he was a legend newly born. I forced myself to smile, but my lips trembled with the effort. My chest tightened with a heaviness I couldn't put into words. Pride and jealousy tangled into one sharp ache. My brother's eyes swept the room, and for a fleeting second, they landed on me. He grinned wider, as though to say, "Look at me now." My stomach turned. I wasn't sure if it was admiration or resentment clawing inside me. Don't forget to like and drop a comment. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. The speeches followed. Men in suits, women in expensive dresses, all taking their turns at the microphone, praising him as though he were chosen by fate itself. My mother clung to my father, whispering about how this was a blessing, how our lives would never be the same again. I should have been happy. I should have felt grateful that fortune had touched someone in my family. But instead, I sat in the middle of it all, swallowed by the sound of joy that wasn't mine. It was when the applause finally thinned that I noticed him. A man I didn't recognize, dressed simply, almost invisible in his plain gray coat. He didn't push toward my... By the time the ceremony reached its end, and my brother was ushered onto a stage for more photographs, I felt dizzy from holding myself together. The lights, the cheers, the endless praise, they all blurred into the background. I had only one clear thought, repeating over and over in my head. What is in this envelope? When the crowd surged forward again, desperate for one last chance to bask in his light, I slipped quietly out of my chair. My hand pressed against the envelope through my pocket, and I gripped it tightly, almost afraid it might vanish if I let go. My feet moved toward the exit, each step heavy, my chest tight with both fear and anticipation. I didn't look back at my brother. I couldn't. The envelope was mine now, and whatever it carried was waiting to be discovered. I didn't open it right away. The envelope sat on my desk for hours, its silence louder than the noise still echoing in my head from the ceremony. My brother's laughter had followed me home, carried by the endless replay on television and the flood of posts online. Photos of him shaking hands, kissing babies, leaning on the Tesla like it was already an extension of him. I avoided the screen, but the glow from it still reached me, reminding me that the world was his now. I sat in the dimness of my room, the envelope before me like a challenge I wasn't sure I wanted to face. My fingers brushed over the flap, my pulse quickening. What could be inside something so plain, so unassuming? It felt absurd that this small piece of paper had the power to gnaw at me, to keep me restless, while the rest of the house hummed with pride and celebration. When I finally tore it open, the sound of ripping paper was sharp in the quiet, almost violent. I expected money, maybe a check with a smaller number, some kind of consolation prize. But when I tipped the contents into my hand, my breath caught. A photograph slid onto my palm, black and white, the edges curled with age. A man stood there, unsmiling, beside a building I didn't recognize. His face was stern, his eyes piercing in a way that made me uncomfortable. I turned it over, hoping for a name, a date, anything. The back was blank. Beneath it came a folded piece of paper, yellowed and soft from time. I opened it carefully, my hands trembling. The handwriting was faded, slanted, and hard to read in places. It wasn't long, just a handful of lines. You'll know what to do when the time comes. This belongs to you, not him. Protect it. Don't fail. Don't forget to like and drop a comment. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. There was no signature.
No explanation.
My eyes skimmed the words over and over, trying to make sense of them, but each reading only deepened the confusion. And then, last of all, a small brass key slid free. It was cold against my skin, heavy for its size. Old, the teeth slightly worn. No tag, no lockbox to match it with. Just a key and nothing more. I sat back in my chair, the items laid out before me like clues in a puzzle I hadn't asked to solve. My throat tightened with a mix of frustration and fear. Why me? Why had the stranger chosen me, the one left invisible in the shadow of my brother's glory? And why give me this, an image of a stranger, a cryptic note, a key to nowhere, while my brother walked away with the world? My chest ached with jealousy, a sharp, twisting kind. I hated myself for feeling it, but I couldn't help it. He had money, cars, property, and all I had was mystery. But beneath that jealousy was something else, something I couldn't quite name. A flicker, a spark of possibility. The sound of laughter downstairs cut through my thoughts. My family was still celebrating. My mother's voice rose above the rest, giddy and full of pride. I imagined them raising glasses, making toasts, talking about the ways our lives would change because of my brother. I clenched the key tighter in my fist, the metal biting into my skin. I didn't tell them what I had. Not that night, not the next morning, not ever. Every time I thought about walking downstairs and placing the photograph or letter in front of them, something in me froze. The words of the note rang in my head. This belongs to you, not him. I couldn't explain it, but it felt dangerous to share. As though the moment I opened my mouth, whatever the secret was would slip out of my hands forever. At breakfast the next day, my brother came downstairs in a fresh suit, his phone buzzing with messages. The local news had called, then some magazine, then a company wanting to feature him in a campaign. He soaked it all in, talking fast, smiling wider than ever. My mother leaned over him, fixing his collar as though he were a child again, glowing with pride. Your life has changed forever, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I pushed food around my plate, the photograph burning in the pocket of my jeans. I wondered if any of them noticed how quiet I had become, how my eyes didn't meet theirs. But they were too busy orbiting around him, too caught up in his light to notice the shadow sitting at the same table. Later, when the house emptied out, I went back to my room and stared at the items again. The man in the photograph seemed to look straight at me, his expression unreadable, his presence heavy. The note's words pressed against my chest like a weight. And the key, I couldn't stop rolling it in my fingers, couldn't stop imagining what lock it belonged to. It felt like the beginning of something, though I had no idea what. Don't forget to like and drop a comment. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just a cruel joke or a mistake. Maybe the envelope wasn't even meant for me. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The stranger had looked me in the eye, steady and deliberate, as if he'd known exactly what he was doing. That night, lying awake in the dark, I thought about the contrast. My brother was on billboards, in headlines, his name echoing everywhere. And me? I had secrets pressed beneath my pillow, things I couldn't explain, things I couldn't even share. Yet, for reasons I couldn't understand, I felt something stir inside me. Not pride, not jealousy, but a strange kind of courage. Maybe this was my path, different from his. Maybe this envelope was never about giving me less, but giving me something else entirely.
I didn't know what yet.
But I knew one thing for certain. Whatever it was, it had chosen me. And now I had to choose what to do with it. The key wouldn't leave me alone. I carried it in my pocket for days, rolling it between my fingers when no one was looking, pressing it against my palm until the edges dug into my skin. At night, I placed it on my bedside table, staring at it in the glow of the streetlight that slipped through my blinds. Every time I closed my eyes, I dreamed of locks I couldn't open and doors that led to places I didn't understand. It took almost a week before I gave in. The man at the hardware store squinted when I showed him the key. "Old style," he muttered, holding it under the light. "Not for a house. Too small. Maybe storage, maybe a safe." He shrugged, handing it back like it meant nothing. But to me, his words were a spark, a direction. I searched the outskirts of town, the kind of places most people ignored, until I found it. A row of storage units stretched along a cracked lot, weeds pushing through the concrete. The paint was peeling from the doors, numbers faded and crooked. It looked forgotten, a graveyard of things people had locked away and abandoned. My chest tightened as I walked along the row, the key sweating in my fist. When I reached Unit 37, I knew. The key slid into the lock with a soft resistance, as though it hadn't been turned in years. My hand shook as I twisted it, the sound of the mechanism clicking open echoing louder than it should have in the quiet air. The door groaned when I pulled it up. Dust swirled into my face, the scent of metal and mildew hitting me hard. I coughed, blinking through the haze, and stepped inside. It wasn't empty. Don't forget to like and drop a comment. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. Stacks of boxes filled the space, some collapsing under their own weight, others neatly labeled in handwriting I didn't recognize. Old trunks leaned against the walls, their edges rusted, locks broken. A desk stood at the back, scarred and splintered, with piles of papers still scattered across it, as though someone had left in a hurry. My pulse thudded in my ears. I didn't know where to begin. I opened the nearest box, my fingers trembling as I pulled out folders, each stuffed with documents. Letters, bank records, contracts stamped with signatures that made my stomach twist. I skimmed page after page, trying to make sense of the words, but they blurred together, filled with names I didn't know, companies I'd never heard of. In another box, I found journals, leather-bound, the covers cracked and brittle. The handwriting inside was sharp and meticulous, recording meetings, payments, warnings. Page after page spoke of deals made in shadows, favors exchanged, debts collected. It didn't feel like fiction. It felt like a history written in secrets, meant for eyes that weren't supposed to see. And then I saw it, our family name. My breath caught. I flipped back, my hands shaking so hard the journal nearly slipped from my grip. There it was again, clear and undeniable. My father's name, listed among others. Notes about land transfers, money exchanged, meetings with men I'd never heard him mention. Words like cover-up and agreement appeared in the margins underlined. The air seemed to thicken around me. I sank onto a crate, clutching the journal to my chest. For a long time, I couldn't breathe. My family wasn't who I thought they were. Everything I had grown up believing, our struggles, our stories, our pride, suddenly cracked like thin glass. And my brother's fortune, it wasn't random. It wasn't fate choosing him. It was blood and history, tangled in something dangerous. I flipped deeper into the journals, the words blurring through the sting of my eyes. Notes about securing the future. Mentions of payments meant to silence people. References to foundations and charities that sounded good, but were clearly shells for something darker. And over, a single warning scrawled in the margins in that same sharp hand. Not him. Never him. My throat tightened. Who was him? My brother? Why had the stranger said the envelope was mine? Why me, and not the one who now lived in the mansion, who drove the Tesla, who bathed in cameras and applause? Don't forget to like and drop a comment. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. I pulled open another trunk, the lock snapping easily under my hand. Inside were more photographs, some black and white, others in faded color. Different men and women, standing together in stiff lines, their faces unsmiling. I recognized one, my grandfather, younger, sterner, standing with men in military uniforms. Another photo showed my father, years before I was born, shaking hands with someone whose face I couldn't place, but whose name I had seen in the journals. It was all there. Proof. Evidence of ties that stretched back decades, of a legacy I had never been told about, a shadow woven into the fabric of my family. I sank deeper into the dust and silence of that storage unit, my hands black with dirt and ink, my head spinning. The jealousy I had felt before shrank into something else entirely. Fear. Fear of what I was holding. Fear of what it meant for me. The stranger hadn't given me riches. He had given me truth. And truth, I was beginning to understand, was heavier than any mansion, any car, any check. For hours, I sat there, reading, sifting, piecing together fragments of a story that stretched longer than I could comprehend. By the time I finally stepped out into the fading light, the air cool against my damp skin, I wasn't the same. The world outside the unit looked ordinary, cars humming down the road, children laughing in the distance. But I carried something no one else could see. Knowledge that made my hands shake, that pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't set aside. As I locked the door behind me, the key trembling in the lock, I realized something that made my stomach drop. My brother's fortune wasn't a blessing. It was a chain binding him to something he didn't even understand. And me? I hadn't been given an envelope to comfort me. I had been chosen to carry the burden no one else could, or would. I looked down at the key in my hand, cold and heavy as it had been the first time I touched it. For the first time, I understood what it truly was. Not a gift, not even a clue, a calling. I thought finding the storage unit would bring answers. Instead, it only opened doors I wasn't ready to walk through. Every box, every journal I touched added weight to my chest. The air around me seemed heavier now, like knowledge itself carried gravity. Don't forget to like and drop a comment. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. At first, I tried to convince myself I had misread everything. Maybe the names weren't the same. Maybe the documents were fake, abandoned by someone else decades ago. But the handwriting didn't lie. The photographs didn't lie. My father's face staring back at me from meetings he had never spoken about, his name signed beneath agreements that hinted at things darker than I wanted to imagine. It was all too real. And then there were the letters. Some typed, some handwritten, all carrying the same undercurrent. Betrayal. Deals made behind closed doors, allies discarded when they no longer served a purpose, promises broken without hesitation. Words like bribery, silence, and threat appeared with chilling regularity. It was as though my family's history had been built not on resilience, as I had been told, but on secrets buried deep enough to suffocate anyone who got too close. The note in the envelope echoed in my head. This belongs to you, not him. Protect it. Don't fail. Protect what? The legacy? The truth? Or myself? Meanwhile, my brother's new life unfolded like a film I couldn't escape. He appeared on television every night, grinning, holding interviews, standing in front of the mansion with politicians and celebrities. Social media adored him. Hashtag Golden Brother. Hashtag 75 million man. To the world, he was untouchable, the symbol of luck and promise. But I started noticing cracks. One night, I heard him pacing in his room, his voice sharp through the thin walls. He wasn't talking like the confident man the world saw. He was arguing.
pleading.
I pressed my ear against the wall, my skin prickling. Words like contract, obligation, and payment slipped through. Then silence, broken only by his uneven breathing. At breakfast the next morning, his hands shook as he lifted his coffee cup. He laughed it off, brushing away my mother's concern, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. I caught him looking at his phone constantly, his face tightening each time a message came through. It hit me then. The fortune wasn't free. The mansion, the car, the money, they were chains disguised as gifts. And the people who had given them weren't benefactors. They were owners. I went back to the storage unit, searching the documents with new urgency. I found contracts hidden among the journals, binding agreements signed not just by my father, but by names I recognized from the news. Men in government, executives, men whose power reached far beyond what anyone imagined. These weren't partnerships. They were debts. Payments owed, promises enforced with quiet threats. My stomach turned as I pieced it together. My brother hadn't been chosen by chance. He was a pawn, an image to parade while hidden hands pulled the strings. His fortune wasn't a reward. It was leverage. Don't forget to like and drop a comment. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. And me? By holding the envelope, by holding the proof, I was now a danger. I realized this one night when I left the storage unit and saw a black car idling at the edge of a lot. Its windows were tinted, its engine humming low. My pulse spiked. I walked faster, pretending not to notice, but when I glanced back, the car was still there, headlights glowing faintly. I didn't breathe until I was home. The door locked behind me, my back pressed against it. After that, I started to feel eyes on me. A man at the grocery store lingering too long in the same aisle. A woman at a cafe watching me over her coffee, her gaze snapping away when I met it. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe the secrets in the journals had poisoned my mind. But maybe not. Because then the first note appeared. It was slid under my door one evening, folded neatly, no envelope. Only 4 words, scrawled in the same sharp handwriting I had seen in the storage boxes. You're not safe anymore. I sat on the floor staring at it, my hands numb, my breath shallow. My first instinct was to run to my family to tell them everything. But then I thought of my brother's face, tight with fear behind his smiles, the way my parents clung to him, like he was their salvation. If I told them, what would it do? Could I even trust them not to bury it deeper, to silence me the way the documents suggested others had been silenced? I burned the note in my sink, watching the edges curl black, the smoke sting my eyes. From then on, I carried the key on a chain around my neck, hidden under my shirt. It felt like armor, though I wasn't sure it could protect me from what was coming. The journals, the photographs, the contracts, I locked them back in the unit each time, terrified of what would happen if anyone found them in my possession. But the knowledge stayed with me. It pressed down harder each day, making it harder to sleep, harder to breathe. It wasn't just envy anymore or fear. It was responsibility. The stranger had chosen me for a reason, and I was beginning to understand it. My brother's fortune wasn't meant to be protected. It was meant to distract. The truth, that was mine to guard. And it terrified me. Don't forget to like and drop a comment. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. One evening, as the sun bled orange across the sky, I stood at the window and watched my brother pull into the driveway in his Tesla. Cameras followed, neighbors waving as though he were royalty. My parents rushed out to greet him, their faces glowing with joy. I stayed inside, the chain cold against my skin, the words of the envelope burning in my mind. Protected. Don't fail. I didn't know yet what protecting it meant, whether it was keeping it buried or dragging it into the light. But I knew one thing with certainty. The choice wasn't far away. And once I made it, nothing about my life or my family would ever be the same again. It started slowly, almost imperceptibly, the way things always do when they're beginning to fall apart. At first, it was just murmurs online, threads questioning my brother's sudden rise, whispers of ties to people with questionable reputations. He laughed it off at dinner, calling it jealousy, the price of fame. But I could see the tightness in his jaw, the way his phone never left his hand, the sleepless shadows under his eyes. Then the headlines came. Not outright accusations, but carefully worded articles raising doubts. Where did the fortune really come from? Golden Brothers' mysterious sponsors. The mansion that once made our family beam with pride now looked like a stage set under siege. The press camped outside, cameras flashing whenever he stepped through the gates. I remembered the note. "You're not safe anymore." At the time, I thought it was about me. But maybe it had been about him all along. The pressure twisted him. He started shouting at our parents over little things. The toast too cold, the car not polished. He snapped at me when I asked if he was okay, his voice breaking in a way that betrayed desperation more than anger. I caught him one night in the study, hunched over a pile of papers, his hands trembling as he signed something with a pen that left deep, angry grooves in the paper. When I entered, he shoved everything into a drawer and forced a smile, but the mask cracked. For the first time, I saw fear etched plainly on his face. I wanted to hate him. After all, he had everything I didn't. But watching him unravel, I felt something different. Pity. Maybe even sorrow. The money wasn't freedom. It was a leash, one he couldn't break even if he tried. And I still had the key. The storage unit weighed on my mind constantly. The documents inside weren't just relics anymore. They were weapons, maps of corruption stretching across decades. They could destroy reputations, topple alliances, maybe even bring justice. But they could also destroy my family, scorch every bridge we had, and put me in the crosshairs of people far more powerful than I could comprehend. Don't forget to like and drop a comment. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. For nights, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the chain around my neck pressing into my skin. What was I supposed to do? Expose everything? Hand it to the authorities? Or lock it all away and pretend I had never seen it? The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday. My brother's car was splashed across the news, not for its shine this time, but because it had been vandalized. Words like thief and fraud were spray-painted across the doors in thick red strokes. He didn't come home that night. When he finally did, his face was pale, his clothes damp, his hands shaking as he poured a drink he downed too quickly. Our parents hovered helplessly, trying to soothe him, but he pushed them away. That night, I sat across from him in the dim kitchen light. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice hoarse. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" He spat suddenly, the glass in his hand clinking against the table. I swallowed.
No.
"Yes, you do," he pressed, leaning forward, his breath sharp with whiskey. "You think because you got the stupid envelope, you're the chosen one, or whatever. But look at me." He gestured wildly around him. "I'm the one everyone sees. I'm the one they gave everything to, and now I'm drowning in it. Drowning." His voice cracked on the last word. He slammed the glass down, but it shattered in his hand, cutting his palm. Blood welled, dark and vivid, but he didn't even flinch. He just stared at me, his eyes glossy with something between anger and despair. And in that moment I understood. He wasn't my rival. He was a prisoner. The next day, I went back to the storage unit. My hands shook as I unlocked it, the musty smell hitting me like a wave. I pulled out the heaviest box, spread the papers across the floor, and started sorting. I highlighted connections, traced signatures, built a timeline. Hours passed unnoticed, my mind sharp with focus. For the first time, I wasn't paralyzed by fear. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about proving I was worthy or exposing him. It was about choice. I couldn't change the past, couldn't untangle the deals my father had made, but I could choose what to do with the truth now. By evening, I had packed a folder with copies of the most damning documents. I didn't take them to the press. I didn't march into the police station. Instead, I slipped them into a sealed envelope and sent it to a lawyer whose name I found buried in the journals, one my father had once trusted but later cast aside. A man known quietly for integrity. I left no return address. It wasn't about credit. It was about release. Don't forget to like and drop a comment. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. When I walked out of the post office, the air felt different, lighter. The chain around my neck no longer felt like a shackle. For the first time since opening that envelope, I could breathe. Meanwhile, my brother's world continued to crumble. Sponsors pulled out. Friends vanished. The mansion grew quieter, emptier. He still tried to smile for the cameras, but it looked painted on, a hollow performance. One evening, I found him sitting alone by the pool, staring at the reflection of the water, his shoulders hunched like a man twice his age. I wanted to tell him it wasn't too late, that he could still step out of the golden cage, but I knew he wouldn't listen. He was too deep inside it, too entangled. So I left him there, not out of cruelty, but out of acceptance. His inheritance was wealth wrapped in poison. Mine was truth, painful but clean. The last time I visited the storage unit, I didn't go inside. I just stood there with the key in my hand, feeling its weight one final time before I dropped it into the drain by the curb. It clattered against the metal, then disappeared into the darkness. I walked away. The envelope had once felt like a curse, a reminder that I had been excluded, denied, lesser. But now I understood. It had never been about exclusion. It had been about trust. The stranger hadn't given me money. They had given me freedom. And as the rain began to fall, soft and steady against my skin, I felt it for the first time. Clarity. My brother could keep his crumbling empire. I had inherited something greater. Myself. Hey besties, thanks so much for sticking around till the end. If you felt something, learned something, or just enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, drop a comment, and hit that subscribe button.